Hello. I'm going to read something to you from the 14th century Kashmiri mystic Lalla. She was what we might call today an illuminated being, a true mystic who saw beyond the veil of this ordinary world. This poem she wrote, I am nothing, I was nothing, is very powerful. When my mind was cleansed of impurities, like a mirror of its dust and its dirt, I recognized the self in me. When I saw him dwelling in me, I realized that he was everything and I was nothing. She wrote that from the perspective of being a 14th century woman mystic of her culture and time. But there's a real gem of wisdom in there that's timeless. And that is that when we are able to cleanse the lens of our ego perception, that we can see truth, the true self that we are eternal, immortal fractals of the divine creator, who are inhabiting these bodies and identities, but are not either our body or our identity, that we are that which has always been. And I think that for many of us today, to say, I was nothing or I am nothing, is really difficult. There was a mystic whose name I can't remember now. I think it was Nisargadatta, I'm not sure anyway. He said something about when he looked within, he could see he was nothing, but then he could see he was everything, because the truth of his essence, of our essence, is unified in this oneness that we call divine. And I think that that kind of non-dual wisdom is so important for the time that we're living in now. The reason being is that if we really are committed to this true faith in that divine oneness in God, as however we might want to describe that mystery, that mystery that we are a part of it and is a part of us and is a part of every other living being on the planet, that knowing changes our relationship with everything. When we fight wars or we engage in ego-based battles, and when I say the ego, I'm talking about that little self, that nothing that we believe that we ultimately are. When we're not handing control over to that separate, fearful, anxious self that has been formed by millions of years of evolution and decades in this particular life or incarnation, with traumas and fears and worries and the internalization and introjection of so much stuff that distorts the filters of perception, that when we are no longer aligned with that self and we are aligned with the self that we all eternally are, how can we then pick up a weapon and attack ourselves? Because when we attack another, when we besmirch another, when we hate another, that we're hating ourselves. In the quantum mystery, that all is unified, nothing is separate. And so when we think of someone that we think is an appalling person, and we decide that we want to see the destruction of that other person, that we want to see them, kind of stopped and destroyed, whatever it might be, and often we feel that way towards people in power. That what we do is that we attack the self, we attack the true self which is in all of us. It's one thing to say that a particular personality is getting it wrong in terms of love, because love is the essence of who we truly are. And if we're not in contact with that true self, if we're not being influenced by that divine self. What we're being influenced by is an illusory, separate, fear-based, evolutionarily tainted little I that thinks that it has to go to war with others in order to survive, that's operating out of its fight, flight, freeze, and appease system, that's operating out of its prejudices, its disappointments, its fears, its angers, its distrust, its self-hatred, its hatred of others. And that little self is not you. That's not the you that will survive after you die. That's not the you that will persist into eternity. The effects of that little you, what we might call karma, will be with us, and then we have to find a way to cleanse ourselves of that burden. But who we truly are when we make complete contact with that self, as Lalla said, and I see that I am nothing, and that the true self is everything. That true self then allows us to love and live and care for each other, the planet, and one another with such love. In oneness, there is no attack. In oneness, there is no hatred. In oneness, there is only love. And very often mystics that have discovered this and tried to say it have found themselves being persecuted and silenced and made to feel like they're a fool, because they're not speaking from the ego, the proud, arrogant, boastful, bloated ego self. And other egos recognize their egos. What egos don't recognize and feel frightened of is when the divine speaks forth from the other, because their perception, the windows of perception for them have been closed, and so their true self can't manifest itself in the world. So what we're seeing in terms of greed and anger and hatred and grasping is all part of that. So just think about those words of Lalla. Think about the windows of perception, that when they're cleaned, when they're purified, when we are not identifying with the little self that we think we are, that we are in the eternal self, that we're in the true self, that we're in the illuminated, enlightened self. Okay, have a good day. Bye-bye.